Today we're likely to be a little bit controversial about an issue which is grabbing headlines for all the wrong reasons as complaints mount to authorities about Enlafax. It's a generic antidepressant, a replacement for one of the most common antidepressants in New Zealand. Both New Zealand's mainstream television channels have run stories detailing serious side effects of this replacement antidepressant, Enlafax, and so far Pharmac has received at least 240 complaints about it. A Facebook group has formed with already 800 members, and that group is called Enlafax, Problems with Medication Brand Change New Zealand, and telling experiences with the generic drug. Also, there's a petition that has been mounted by Sarah McRae, and we hope to speak to Sarah a bit later in the show, and that's seeking a public inquiry into Pharmac's patient safety protocols for generic medication. The Facebook page called Enlafax, Problems with Medication Brand Change New Zealand, is also working on a combined complaint to the Health and Disability Commissioner. And if you wish to be involved in this, please private message Heather Williams on Facebook with your email address, and she will send you the information. So here to talk about this storm of protest or outcry is Gayleen Morris, who's also one of the arbiters of a Facebook page called Friends, and it's pronounced Maurice. I'm sorry, Gayleen Maurice. I was under special instructions about that pronunciation, and apologies, Gayleen. She has a Facebook page called Friends of Waiatarau. She's also talked publicly about the challenges of reducing her psych meds, and particularly Enlafax, on many of the mental health Facebook pages. Well, welcome, Gayleen, and apologies for my mispronunciation of your surname. What's your take on this Enlafax issue?
Well, all I could say is thank goodness there are people out there getting motivated, because initially I thought maybe it was just me. Then I got a few more calls and so forth and realised, oh, there are some of us. And then I started to think like maybe people out there in radio land that, well, maybe it's just the gossip. And if you're not feeling too good, then maybe, you're just catching on with everybody else and going with the flow.
You just want something to blame, perhaps, if you're not feeling too good. But
I tell you what, it's not true. It actually is happening.
Right.
It is happening.
In fact, I would say that there's more of a momentum of protest about this Enlafax than I have seen in mental health circles for quite some time.
And it's because it is actually life-threatening, and this is a very important part.
Well, we've seen people who are taking Enlafax being interviewed on television saying that they're feeling suicidal, they feel their life is at risk. I did print out all the side effects for Enlafax, and I raised that with my GP last week, and he said, well, I think it's important that you compare all the side effects of Effexor, which of course is a drug that has been replaced by this generic, and to see whether those side effects are similar or the same. I didn't have that opportunity to do that, but I'm a bit sceptical about that, but I shouldn't be sceptical about what my GP is saying. But you're on Enlafax, and you've been trying to reduce?
The box in today, and because inside there are no instructions at all.
And there used to be, in the old days when I took venlafaxine, there was definitely a very comprehensive information, a brochure, in fact, about that. And I think this is one of the things that people are nervous about. That, the drug companies don't seem to be informing us about the side effects, about the nature of these medications. I just wanted to clarify, though, you said I've always called it venlafaxine. venlafaxine is the sort of common name for Effexor. Now, this Enlafax has replaced Effexor, hasn't it?
Yep.
So let us know what your experience on Enlafax has been. How long have you been taking Enlafax?
I've actually been taking it for 8 years. I didn't think that was very long, but considering that there are always those wise people that say, well, look, be careful. If you've been it on for 6 months and you want to come off, just take it easy. With my reply is, but I've been on it for 8 years.
But can I just hear we might be confusing our listeners.
Of course.
Enlafax hasn't been on the market for 8 years, has it? So
No.
you started taking this venlafaxine, or its brand is Effexor, Efexor, and then you got a replacement because Pharmac decided to introduce this generic antidepressant called Enlafax. So do you recall how long you've been on Enlafax?
I wouldn't recall. It would have been when it first decided to come out.
Right.
Because I didn't ask for it. The doctor wouldn't have asked for it. It would have come across the counter when I went to get my prescription.
But does that mean that you didn't get any particular warning about this change?
No, there would have been a warning about the very first change, that it would be coming and that it would be slowly withdrawn.
Right.
That was it. And then there was the arrow, I call it had arrow written on the packet. So that came out.
Right.
And then I don't recall anything about the next one.
Oh, well, which is Enlafax. And I think that I do recall there being some publicity about how this generic antidepressant was going to be introduced to replace venlafaxine or Effexor. And, you know, I think we need to know that Effexor is one of the most popular antidepressants, and there are hundreds of thousands of people on antidepressant medication in New Zealand. So this change to Enlafax is likely to. But have you noticed any side effects?
Well, I did, and it was a bit worrying. The reason why I decided to come and try and reduce that particular medication was because my body just seemed to be doing different things. I started to get scratching my skin, and I just it just seemed wrong. My body just seemed wrong, and I wasn't very happy. And I thought, you know, I didn't want to increase. Was only allowed to increase another 75 mgs. I was on 300, and each time you go up by 75 mg. So I thought I'm either going to have to go up to try and get rid of the side effects. Okay, might not sound logical, but for me it was. And then what? I can't go any higher. So it was an awful feeling, and I just knew it was wrong, spoke to my doctor, and she just went and looked it up, you know, onto the computer, feeds back to me. Now, when it comes to medications, I just have the two main ones. The others are for more the physical health, and that's venlafaxine and quetiapine.
Now, let's just clarify there that the venlafaxine is your antidepressant, and you're now taking Enlafax, aren't you? So,
yes.
And then you have quetiapine as your other psychiatric medication.
That's right.
Right.
So I just decided I think I'll come off it.
Off both of those? Or?
Off one at a time.
Right.
Just see how I go. Just to reduce, because I suddenly I'd felt down, and I had felt things that you shouldn't be feeling when you have been on an antidepressant. I found that there was that hole waiting for me to slip into. Now, that hole is when it becomes that stage where I cannot stop feeling very, very low, and that is a danger sign. I don't like that, and I don't want it, and it's not for me.
So this happened after the change from venlafaxine to Enlafax. And the maximum recommended dose for this antidepressant is 300 milligrams, isn't it? So were you going beyond that 300?
I was told I could go up one more.
Right, so 375. Right.
So I was definitely at that stage where what will I do? Now, I had tried other medications which were probably similar for people with sort of severe depression. But I reacted by wanting to climb up the wall, do really strange things, felt incredibly ill. So this seemed to be the last medication that I could actually be able to, that my body could put up with.
Right.
Because there are the side effects, but those side effects I could never really know what they were initially.
Did you get any tremors in your hands, arms?
Tremor only in the last, say, year.
Well, that coincides with the introduction of Enlafax, of course. Sarah, are you there?
Hi, Sheldon. Yes, how are you doing?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much for making time in your busy work schedule. I just wanted to... you've got this petition you want to open a public inquiry into Pharmac's patient safety protocols for generic medication, and you say on Facebook, share this far and wide, gather as many signatures as you can. This is a major issue that has cost lives, destroyed lives, and it's about to happen again to another vulnerable group of patients. Help us make change happen. That's a fairly strong statement, Sarah.
Absolutely. And if you've spoken to a number of the 800 patients that we have in our support group at the moment that have all gone through some very serious experiences with the changeover to Enlafax, then you'd understand how strong we feel about the particular cause.
So what have your own personal experiences on Enlafax been?
I went down to my chemist and he told me that it was exactly the same brand, it was just a different name. It was actually the same drug, just a different name, like a rebranding. So I went away, didn't think anything of it. And when I have triggers in my life, I'm very aware of what can actually set me off into a downward spiral, what can trigger my depression. And I'm normally good at picking myself up before I get too far down and seeking support. But there was nothing in my life that changed. There was nothing to tell me to keep an eye out for anything. So I didn't notice the minor symptoms that started to creep up on me. After 5 or 6 weeks, I realized that I was having constant colds and sickness and a very funny head, and I was just not happy. Things were just not going right, but people were putting it down to the stress of having 4 children. And I started to believe that maybe I couldn't cope. Maybe I'd taken on too much. But then a couple of weeks after that, I found myself realizing that I'm having symptoms as if I'd forgotten my medication, but I haven't forgotten it. And I started to see more and more creep up on me. So I spoke to my pharmacist and I said, well, what's going on? Is there a problem with this medication? I feel like I'm having withdrawal symptoms. And he dismissed me out of hand and said, no, it can't possibly be the drugs. It's exactly the same. So it must be something else going on in your life. So I returned home and started to question myself further. And then after a couple of days, I was in an absolute state. I was in a full-on panic attack. I was in full anxiety. I couldn't settle. I didn't want to speak to anyone, didn't want to see anyone. I ended up having to be sedated that night at the casualty department. I was in such a terrible state. And that was when I realized I was actually going through full-on withdrawal from venlafaxine.
So you're attributing these symptoms, these side effects, to the withdrawal from the earlier antidepressant called venlafaxine or Effexor, or are you attributing it to the new antidepressant called Enlafax?
I'm attributing it to the fact that I seem to have a slow withdrawal from the actual active ingredient, which was venlafaxine. I don't believe that Enlafax can actually be slow released in the body the same way that Effexor does. And I believe I ended up having a withdrawal period every single day until the point that I was just in full detox, full withdrawal from venlafaxine. And, nothing would have actually fixed it at that point.
So that suggests that Enlifax wasn't helping you in terms of the symptoms that you were taking an antidepressant for.
Absolutely, it was like the therapeutic effectiveness had just stopped, and it slowly stopped. So it wasn't like overnight straight away I'd gone cold turkey and didn't have my medication, because those symptoms are very obvious, and I can feel that within 4 to 6 hours. I know straight away I've forgotten a dose. This was a slow, gradual removal of the venlafaxine from my system, it seemed, or a slow, gradual withdrawal that crept up on me. Like it just wasn't anywhere near as effective, or perhaps it didn't do the 48-hour slow release that it's supposed to, like Effexor does. I'm really only speculating. I'm not a chemist. All I know is that my body got to the point after 6 weeks where it was in full withdrawal from venlafaxine, and I needed to be sedated. I was in such a state. The panic attacks and the full-on anxiety, the stress, the head zaps, every time I moved my mind, my head, it was like my mind was just taking a second or two to catch up. It was awful. I crashed my car 3 times in the space of 2 weeks. I haven't done that for 23 years prior. I should never have been driving. The vertigo and the spatial awareness just wasn't there. They should have been warning me about this. They should have been telling me to look out for these kind of symptoms.
What I want to clarify is, though, that are you suggesting that Enlifax has no antidepressant qualities or strengths in order to prevent the experiences that you had?
If that was the case, I would have been in that state within 24, 48 hours. I'm not suggesting that at all.
No.
I'm suggesting that it's not as effective as the other brands, and without any of us being given that advice or being told to keep an eye out for our symptoms, we've gone through a major relapse before we realised that we weren't getting that same level of efficacy from Enlifax.
Right. Well, we've got Gayleen Maurice in the studio here, and Gayleen was talking before we switched across to you, and she confirms the same sort of symptoms of a downward spiral, an obligation almost to have to increase her Enlifax from 300 milligrams to 375. Gayleen, that was certainly what you were confirming.
Well, I'm just sitting here nodding away, and then I've been told, the mic's on, so I thought, everybody knows I was nodding away, saying, yep, everything that's been said is how I felt, which meant therefore I thought I might as well slowly come off it, because what have I got to lose?
Can I just throw a quick thing in there and just ask, why is it that the GPs don't seem to have the information about the medication that they should be advising you of what to expect when it's put out? And also the pharmacists, because most medications as well that you get have got that little sheet you can open up.
Well, we've...
Can I respond to that?
Yes, certainly, Sarah.
No worries. Well, considering the research that we've done, or a process that happens in order to approve a generic medication, is that a generic medication must contain the same active ingredients as the original medication in order to have it licensed and released to patients for use. They test it on healthy individuals, and all they have to do is find out that the active ingredient sits in the blood plasma readings between 80% and 120% of the same reading as the previous medicine. That is enough for them to turn around and say it's exactly the same medicine. You can go and roll it out, fine. That's MedSafe doing their job.
Right.
Pharmac, however, did not do any testing on existing patients, people who are on existing brands. There has not been any research done or any verification that the actual therapeutic effect is the same, which in other cases like aspirin or other lower down the schedule drugs wouldn't actually have that great of an impact on the patient. So maybe your pains come back a little bit more. Okay, we could maybe increase the dose and help you there. When you're dealing with a drug like venlafaxine that has a very, very strong discontinuation system and a very small discontinuation symptoms, a very small change in the dosage can have major effect on the patient with regards to vertigo, brain zaps, that lack of spatial awareness. If you see some of the federal warning leaflets that have been released in America, if you miss one dose of the medication, you are advised not to drive or operate heavy machinery. So I asked him why Pharmac and all of their professionals and their advisors there were able to actually play with the drug and not do it with the control of our general practitioners and our prescribing physicians, to make sure that we were all aware of the potential risks of any change in dosage there or any alteration to therapeutic effect, so that we weren't left alone to suffer. Then when we did return to our pharmacists and tell them, or to our doctors and tell them, they didn't even know about the brand change. Nobody knew about this potential 1% that MedSafe now talk about that would have had negative experiences on that. We've now discovered through our research that there's probably closer to 20% of patients will experience negative effects on generic drugs. And this information was never made public to us, and it was never made public to our doctors. Even now, some of the patients are going back to their doctors in a year on, and they still don't even know about this situation. They don't even know what the problem is with Enlofax. So how do we get this out there?
Well, I went to see my doctor last Thursday, and I said to him, well, there's a bit of an outcry about this Enlofax, and I said, is it possible to get back onto Effexor or venlafaxine? And he said, well, that's a very good question, Sheldon. I'll ring the pharmacy and find out if there are additional costs associated with doing that. And he was told that there would be additional costs. Venlafaxine or Effexor was still available, so I made the shift. I've had quite a dramatic improvement, I think, in shakiness and lack of tremors, or lack of shakiness and lack of tremors. But of course, there is a cost, and the cost to me is $30 a month.
Okay. Why do all pharmacists have such varying prices to be able to obtain the previous brand? That's the biggest question we've been asking. Why shouldn't it be consistent? We'll have one pharmacy that actually quoted over $800 for a 90-day supply to one particular patient. That was exorbitant.
$800?
Yes, we have since challenged that. They have since gone back to the manufacturer, and they have since come back with a revised price. But that was crazy. $850, they said, for a 3-month supply.
Well, I challenged my own pharmacy, and they said their only explanation for the increase or the slightly higher cost for them was that the chemist warehouses or the pharmacy warehouses are buying in bulk, and therefore they can offer a discount. But I think whatever the price is, we have on Facebook a letter from Pfizer, who are the suppliers of Effexor, and nowhere in that letter do they say that there will be an additional cost to patients, which I find absolutely staggering. They say Pfizer New Zealand is committed to continuing to supply Effexor XR to New Zealand patients.
I think, again, we're looking at things in a different perspective here. That letter was written in response to a badly worded article on the project a few weeks back saying that Effexor and Arrow were going to be discontinued from the marketplace. Also, from the very beginning, going way back to when our medication was first exchanged, none of us were given an informed choice. Even Pharmac wrote in their paper that your previous brands may no longer be available or affordable. So they made it quite clear that they were going to make it difficult to get access to that brand. We were told by pharmacists and doctors that your old brand was not even possible to obtain anymore. A number of patients on that site were told that by the pharmacists who can't get the old brand and forced to change onto Enlofax. The biggest problem has come from is that people have been left on a brand and not listened to and forced to go onto the substandard brand. So if they'd sat down and said there is a 10% chance we might have a few issues with this particular drug, but this is the new funded one, so it's going to be cheaper for you to go onto this. Do you want to try it? See how you go. Come back to me if you've got any problems. None of this would have happened.
Right.
None of this issue would have happened with these people.
Sarah, what sort of warning did you get as a user of antidepressants? Do you believe there was any warning that this changeover was going to happen?
No, I didn't know anything about it. The only thing I heard about it was when I went down to the chemist, and he just said to me, exactly the same medication, just got a different name. You'll be fine.
So did you go to your chemist with a new prescription, or did you just go to get a top-up?
It was a repeat prescription. Yes, so I just went for my repeat, and he just handed me a different name.
In different packaging? without any information leaflet inside the packaging either.
Well, I had the leaflet that Pharmac had produced, but I didn't have any of the MedSafe leaflet or the warning about medication. And the leaflet that Pharmac produced back then, when this happened to me in June, is very different to what it's actually on their website now.
Right.
And it purely just said this is exactly the same. It should work in exactly the same way. It's delivered to the body in the same way. You'll experience no issues with this medication. And yeah, very straightforward. Oh, and your previous brand may no longer be available or affordable.
So what actions have you taken personally, given that list of side effects, very, very serious side effects?
I had to fight with my general practitioner to be heard as to what was going on with myself. I knew it was a medication because I finally put everything together. And luckily for me, I was in such an agitated state, and I'm very strong-minded. He tried to pacify me by giving me what I wanted, so he wrote on the prescription, Effexor, well, we'll try this and see how it goes, but I don't think it's the medication. Within 6 weeks, I was back to my normal self. He saw me regularly every week or two after that. He now has a big warning on my file about do not go anywhere near Enlafax, and he's given me a report about everything that I went through. He also is aware of other patients of his that have gone through the same thing.
Yeah, so can I ask you what dosage have you been able to reduce the dosage of venlafaxine after the change back?
After I started out on 150 of Effexor before this happened, and then when I went back onto 150 after Enlafax, I went back onto Effexor. 150 just didn't seem to be working the same way, so we had to increase. We managed to get rid of all the side effects, all of the brain zaps, and all of the anxiety and the shaking within a couple of weeks. But I couldn't get my mood back up again. It was like Enlafax had actually damaged me, and I got stuck. And whilst I was actually existing fine and feeling healthy, I just felt really flat, and I couldn't find the joy in life again. And I had to end up going up to 300 milligrams to actually get myself back to the point where I felt stable in life again. And in the last...
Sorry. After
in the last 3 months, I've been able to reduce again back down to 225, and I'm still trying to work my way down. But it's taken me a year to have the confidence to even consider that, because it's been still very unstable mood-wise for the last year.
So do you hinge that or sheet that back to your experience on Enlafax?
Sorry, yes, I do. Yes, absolutely, because I had no issues in my life prior, and I think the fear of what I went through and the terror of what I went through. I mean, it's a really terrifying experience, sitting there stuck, and I had to be sedated for a period of about 4 or 5 weeks with lorazepam to try and keep me calm, because I was having panic attacks and absolute anxiety, and I had no reason for that to happen. Nothing